Hinduism. The background of Hinduism is very difficult. Hindu comes from the Sanskrit term for the Indus River, which is not Hindu, but Sindhu. You say, well, why did it get called Hinduism? Because when the Persians took over, they said, what's the name of that river? The Indus River. And they said, well, it's Sindhu. Persians couldn't pronounce the S, so they pronounced it Hinduism. Hindu, the Hindu River. This is a very, very ancient religion. We're talking 2nd millennium BC, before Judaism, or at least concurrent with Moses in the 2nd millennium BC, maybe earlier. There's no founder to Hinduism. How did it begin? Well, the Persians came in and conquered India, and they melded their religions together about 3,500 years ago or 4,000 years ago. And out of that was born Hinduism. The most primitive, nascent forms of Hinduism are very, very disturbing. Let me just kind of open the door a little bit, okay? They would get a stallion. How do I make this PG-13? Okay. They would get a stallion, beef it up and feed it all year long, and then at the end of the year, they would kill that horse. But when rigor mortis set in on the animal, the queen would go underneath the horse, and then a sheet would go over both horse and queen. People would cheer and rouse and clap and dance and do whatever it is that they were doing, and then they would sacrifice other animals, and that was the origin of primitive Hinduism. I won't get any more explicit than that. You can connect the dots on your own. Since then, Hinduism is much different, thank God. Areas of agreement, I'm really reaching here, but they do have the silver rule, not the golden rule. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. Again, how could you fulfill this rule? By doing nothing. The golden rule is do to others what you would have them do to you. Very active. When a man gives up all desires, then he is steadfast in wisdom. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me. Okay, there would be an idea of devotion to God. Areas of disagreement with Hinduism are just, quite frankly, very obvious. This faith is either classified as pantheistic, pan meaning all, like Pangea, one continent, or polytheistic, poly meaning many, theos meaning God. So it's either pantheistic, all is God, or polytheistic, having 330 million gods. So if you speak to a Hindu individual and you say, I believe Jesus is God, what do you suppose they hear? Okay, 330 million and one. Sure. So to them, the idea that there's a multiplicity of gods, almost as many gods as there are Americans at this point in the United States, to them, it's polytheistic, but it's also pantheistic. And you say, how does that work? I don't know. It is very, very confusing. To have the idea that everything is monistic, it's one mono substance, but then it's polytheism. There's almost like there's springing up out of the one substance all of these centers of self-consciousness, humans, gods, and everything else. The best way I can explain it is, at base, it's pantheistic, but then there's expressions which are polytheistic. The history of the universe is cyclical. Time is cyclical, not linear. Like the Bible would say that the arrow of time is linear, what philosophers of time call the A theory of time, that it moves from one event to the next in one direction, forward, future. Under Hinduism, the world is born and reborn over and over and over and over forever. And it has been being born over and over and over forever into the past. The afterlife, on this view, is, again, the extinction of the self. Under Hinduism, they believe in what's called moksha. Moksha means release. With what? With Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. So when you can eventually see that I, the self, am one with the all, Brahman, that is release. Release from what? Release from the idea that I'm an ego, I'm a self, I'm a center of self-consciousness, the ability to look at the world, to say this is all Maya. You say, what's Maya? Illusion. You're not really seeing a world, it's just that it's your ego and you need to let go of that and become one with the all. Think of the Beatles going to the East, and I am you, and you are me, and you are he, and she is me, and we are all together. I am the walrus. I didn't really understand the song. But the idea is, we are all together. We're all one. Atman is Brahman. The Upanishads, you have the Vedas, Upanishads, and then the Bhagavad Gita, I can never say it, the Krishna Bible, I can never say that word. I've practiced it 100 times. I've never been able to say it. I never will be able to say it. I can spell it. Because you've got all these holy books that come down to you. The Upanishads are a bunch of sacred literature, and they compare the self to dropping a piece of salt into water. That if you could just see that you're not this individual self, but you're really just one with the all, that is true moksha, true realization. Consequently, the afterlife is works-based. You do good works that the cycle of reincarnation and the cyclical nature of time, eventually you work your way to moksha, release, where you become one with the universe, which means you are no longer one. So, Christianity, theistic, Hinduism, pantheistic, or polytheistic, or in some versions, they do believe in an infinite God. It's very confusing, very confusing. Christianity, there's one God. Hinduism, there's 330 million gods. Christianity, personal afterlife. Hinduism, many, many, many personal afterlives. As many people over the course of time until extinction. Christianity, predicated on forgiveness. Hinduism, predicated on karmic law. If you do good enough, eventually you reach a point where it's just over. Christianity, there's one life and then judgment. Hinduism, there is reincarnation.